This is the story of a rivalry so intense it changed bodybuilding forever. One man was the king, a six-time Mister Olympia who ruled every room he entered and never feared a challenger. The other was a silent giant, so physically overwhelming that even the king admitted he was different.
He's equally as good as I am, or if it's 50% better as I am.
Two bodies the sport had never seen before, one crown, and a result far closer than history remembers. The boy who should never have become a giant.
Come on, you're gonna do it! Come on!
Lou Ferrigno, the man whose story began far from the spotlight. Starting off at a disadvantage, within months of his birth he developed a series of severe ear infections that destroyed between 75% and 80% of his hearing. However, nobody noticed at first because he was an infant who could not tell anyone the world was going quiet. By the time he was 3 years old, the damage was permanent. His parents took him to doctors, who delivered news that felt like a sentence. Their son has significant hearing loss and will need hearing aids for the rest of his life. In the 1950s, those hearing aids were thick straps wrapped across the chest with wires running to heavy plastic molds shoved into the ears. And the audio quality was poor enough that words came through as muffled shapes rather than clean signals. He wore this equipment to school every day, and every day the other children noticed. They called him Deaf Louie, Deaf Mute, and Freak, and they punched him in the chest deliberately, aiming for the hearing aid strap and trying to break the equipment. When he came home and told his father what happened, he did not receive comfort. His father, Matty Ferrigno, was a New York City police lieutenant who believed the only way to survive hardship was to become harder. He hit Lou again and told him not to come home unless he could fight for himself. Lou has repeated this story in interviews across 5 decades, and every time the details are exactly the same.
I got a beating. I went home, I cried to him. He gave me another beating. He said, don't ever come home again if you can't fight for yourself.
The specificity never fades. He was failing on 2 fronts simultaneously. At school by his peers, and at home by the person who was supposed to be his shield. What a child does with that kind of sustained pressure tells you everything about who they become as an adult. Lou turned inward and started reading comic books, particularly The Incredible Hulk, a story about a gentleman who transforms into an unstoppable giant when provoked. He became obsessed, not because he wanted to smash things, but because the Hulk could not be hurt. In his own words, spoken decades later, I was obsessed with power. I wanted to be strong enough so that I could defend myself. At 13, he decided to build that power with his own hands. He had no money for equipment and could not ask his father for anything, so he took a broomstick from his mother's kitchen, found empty paint cans in a junkyard, filled them with wet cement and waited for them to harden before threading the broomstick through. That was his first barbell. On the floor of a Brooklyn apartment with scavenged materials, one of the most extraordinary physiques in the history of sport began to take shape. The ascent of a silent killer. Lou attended Brooklyn Technical High School, where he studied metalworking and sheet metal fabrication. He was learning how to shape metal at the same time he was learning how to shape his body. And the instincts he developed in that workshop, precision, patience, and the understanding of how structure supports mass, translated directly into how he approached building his physique. He graduated in 1969 and entered his first bodybuilding competition within months. The ascent was fast enough to alarm everyone watching. In 1971, at 19, he won the WBBG Pro Mister America in the teen division. 2 years later, he won the overall IFBB Mister America title in New York. And weeks after that, he traveled to Geneva, Switzerland to compete in the IFBB Mr. Universe against established champions like Ken Waller and Mike Katz, person in history to win that title. His trainer Dan Lurie had been working with him since 1967, when Lou stood at 6 feet 5 and weighed 165 pounds, a skeleton with long bones and nothing yet to show for the ambition behind his eyes. By the time he walked onto the stage in Geneva, he was approaching 270 pounds. That transformation took 6 years in a teenager who had built his first weights from scavenged junk and trained without a proper facility, a proper coach, or any reason to believe the sport would take him seriously. To understand what that meant physically, Arnold Schwarzenegger stood 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed between 230 and 240 pounds. Lou was 3 inches taller and at peak competition weight between 30 and 45 pounds heavier, with a chest measuring 59 inches compared to Arnold's 57. Muscle Builder magazine described him as supermassive with marble-carved definition, and the bodybuilding press started running articles framing a Schwarzenegger-Ferrigno showdown as inevitable. One publication ran a photoshopped image of Lou holding Arnold.